Hey guys, today's video is going to take us inside of the jail once more, this time guided by Bruce Orr. Yes, that's Kevin. Y'all remember Kevin, my boyfriend. And Bruce is going to take us on a tour talking about the history of the jail and a little bit about Lavinia's legend. If you'd like to see the full ghost tour, you can see it with Bruce or any of the other tour guides with Bulldog Tours, the company that's graciously hosting us today. I'll link their website down in the description below.
Check it out, it's awesome.
Before we head inside, go ahead and click that subscribe button to make sure that you don't miss next week's video or any of the others that come after that, where we will continue studying Lavinia Fisher in anticipation of my musical about her. Now, let's head on inside.
So we'll get us in the gate, and I'll lock the gate behind us, and then I'll lock us in because I'm more scared of the living than I am the dead. I tell people all the time I can take a legal pad, write a line down the middle, and I can fill the legal pad up with all the living people that's tried to harm me. There's never any dead people on the side, that's tried to harm me. So I so want to put a handbook of the recently deceased on that coffee table in there, but
You really should, and see just how long it takes for them to...
For somebody to find it out, a little picture of Beetlejuice over on the side there. Bulldog Tours is the only tour company that has access to the jail. John Laverne authorized us to go ahead and go through here tonight and tell you guys a little bit about this place. He's the owner of Bulldog Tours, so I'm going to do that. Now, my name is Bruce Orr. I'm actually one of the tour guides with Bulldog Tours. I'm also a retired law enforcement officer. I was a homicide investigator for many years, so I've been making my living off of dead people for a long, long time. The ghosts in here, they're a lot less fresh than the previous career. I like it a lot better, and I get to talk to you guys without yellow tape between us, so it's a little more cozy than it used to be. But after I retired, everybody said go out and write a book, so I did. The first book I wrote, obviously, was a true crime story based off of a ghost tale involving one of the inhabitants that's in here, and that's why we're here tonight. Her name's Lavinia Fisher. Never had any real interest in the ghost side of things until one night I get a phone call from a gentleman named Joe Taglieri. Taglieri is a producer with a show called Ghost Adventures. They wanted to use my book on their show when they investigated this place. So as I say, after the check cleared, I like ghosts a whole bunch then. So since then, I've consulted for shows like Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, My Ghost Story, Mysteries at the Museum, any of those interested in South Carolina's folklore legends of the Low Country of Charleston. Probably consulted with them in one way, shape, or form behind the scenes. I'm also a historian, also a scuba diver and research diver. Been involved in a lot of maritime archaeological projects with the state of South Carolina, both on the beaches and in the waters with them as a volunteer. But also with Lost in Legend, we do a little bit of that scuba diving stuff ourselves. A couple examples are, a few years ago, my dive partner and I, we pulled a mastodon tusk off the bottom of the Cooper River. We also recovered a jawbone from a coyote species. Last time that coyote was in South Carolina was the last ice age. There's only been 3 fossil specimens of that species found in South Carolina, so that went in the State Museum for study. Conservation and preservation for future generations to enjoy. And when I'm not doing things like that, I'm in places like this, creeping folks like you out. So hopefully that's what we'll do this evening as we go in here. Now, when we go in here, this place is not made for anybody's comfort. It's made out of steel and stone. We're going to be walking in low light areas or no light areas. Just be cautious. There's going to be displays in here. I ask you not to touch anything on the displays. Also, we're going to be talking about subject matter in here. First stop, the first room, we're going to talk about colonial justice. Colonial justice was harsh and brutal, very brutal, and it's not pleasurable at all. It's going to be harsh. Also, we're going to talk about subject matter in here that's going to, by today's standards, be considered sexist and racist. We're not going to candy coat this place. This was a god-awful, horrible place. And you could die very easily in here just for sharing a smile at somebody, and we'll talk about that too. This is the part everybody likes to laugh at. When we get in this building, sometimes this building has an effect on people. Some people get in here, they get vertigo, they feel like the floors are shifting or the walls are shifting. Some people get sick, some people get nauseated, some people pass out. If you start having and experiencing anything like that, let me know, we'll get you out. Please let me know before you vomit on me, not after you vomit on me, and that has happened in here too. Usually on the first tour, so I have to go 4 more without wearing that, so that's usually the way it goes. It does happen in here. We had a couple about 3 months ago. She thought it was very funny until she got into the second room and she woke up on the floor facing us and we had to get her out of here. Last week I had 4 tours. On 2 of them, people fainted. So it does happen in here. With that said, let's go in here. Let's talk a little bit about colonial justice. Well, I'll get the door since you're filming. All right, my friends, we're going to walk in here, cover a little colonial justice. Come on in. All right, my friends. Colonial justice was geared towards humiliating punishments and hanging as opposed to incarceration. Why? Simple economics. You see, it's a whole lot cheaper to embarrass somebody punish them and release them, or execute them and bury them, than it is to put them in a cage, because once you put them in a cage, you have to house, clothe, and feed them, and that gets expensive. So it's simple economics when it comes to colonial justice. They didn't want the expenses. Colonial justice was harsh and brutal. The best thing you could hope for, if you got sentenced to some sort of punishment by a colonial judge, the best thing you could hope for is this thing over here next to you guys called the stocks. The stocks was a device. You'd be sentenced to a public location. They'd have this device out there. They'd have you sit on that bench. They obviously have your legs through there, shut that thing down around your ankles, and they put these irons on your ankles so you couldn't put them back through. And now you're sitting there for a day, and you're going to find out just how nice your neighbors actually are. They're going to come by and they're going to throw things at you. Probably eggs or rotten fruits and vegetables. Going to probably stop by the butchers and see what they've gutted for the day and bring that bucket of stuff and dump it on you. Or maybe they'll throw buckets of human waste or animal waste on you. Good news is all of that washes away. You can get a bath and it's over. The rest of this is not so nice. Doesn't go away. The upgrade from that is the pillory. We've seen all these devices in movies. Obviously, they put your hands through there and your head through there, and now you're out there for 24 hours. You got an overnight stay. So you're going to think to yourself, you know what? As soon as this crowd dies down and it gets evening, I'm just going to drop down to my knees, take that pressure off my neck, take it off my back and shoulders, and get a little rest. Might not be so bad. No, you're not. We're going to guarantee that you don't. How are we going to do that? While you're in this device, we're going to take your ears and we're going to nail them to the top board. Heard the phrase pinning your ears back? That's where it comes from. Now, all those nice little nerves in your ears is going to make sure you don't squat down there. And now you're going to be sentenced to cropping too. Cropping is a colonial rap sheet. It tells that you're a criminal. They're going to come by with a knife and they're going to cut a wedge out of your ear, or cut your earlobe off, or cut the end of your nose off, or cut a wedge out of your nose. So now you're marked as a criminal, and people will know you're a criminal when you go out into the streets of Charleston. When they get ready to open this thing up for you, do you think they're going to take the nails out? No, they're going to shred your ears, so now you're permanently marked. Consider that a colonial rap sheet. This is for whippings and lashings. You think that would be pretty self-explanatory. You tie somebody to a post and you beat them with a whip. Not in Charleston, we're not. This device is called a crane of pain, and the way it operates is actually they have you get on your knees and they lock your legs into place. They put your hands through each one of these nooses, and then they stretch you up as far as they can get you stretched. And some big old burly guard is going to jump up here and grab these as high up as he can and drop off his body weight to the ground and dislocate both of your shoulders and probably damage your legs too. So now all four limbs are disabled. And now they're going to go get a whip. All that looks pretty bad, but there's one that's worse than any of them, and that would be the cat of nine tails. Each one of these strands have what's known as blood knots. Now, each one of those knots contain a piece of glass, ceramic, bone fragment, or pottery. This represents wire. When this thing comes down across your back, it latches in and it digs in, so when you snatch it, it shreds. If you're sentenced to 40 lashings, by the time they finish, they're cutting into your muscles and they're starting to work on your organs. Who's going to take care of you? Those insects and those rodents are going to take care of you, and you're going to die a slow, painful, agonizing death from infection in about a week or a little more. Now, you've got people in the street that are marked. They're scarred up. People know they're criminals. But now you want to know what they did. So how are we going to do that? We're going to take a branding iron, a hot branding iron. We're going to put it on the side of your face or in the palm of your right hand. The three most used letters in the city of Charleston were number one, T for theft. We had a lot of thieves. This is a long forgotten word. This is F for fraymaker. A fraymaker was a person who liked to go out and party too hard, drink a little too much, get in a little fight, get a little rowdy, cause some civil unrest or hate and discontent, or basically me in College of Charleston. The F also represents all the grades that I made during that period in my life, so I think we should bring this back. And then you've got another one, M for manslaughter. If you got downgraded for murder, you got manslaughter, so you get that branded on you. But Judge Nicholas Trott found another use for this type of branding iron in one particular case that we have documentation on in the city of Charleston, and that was Sarah Proctor Dickinson. He flipped it upside down for her. He branded her in the face with W for witchcraft. That's terrible, though. That's sadistic and barbaric. You think we'd forget about it, right? Just, would you believe in 2024 we do things daily that's connected to this, and we don't even know why we even do it? How about a gentleman's handshake? In colonial days, what you were doing is you were reaching to shake their right hand so you would see the brand in the palm of their hand. You were looking for that letter T so you wouldn't do business with a thief. What you're doing is a criminal record check. Every time you're doing a handshake in colonial days, that's why we do it. We just carry it over to now. Or in my line of work, Here's something else that we used to do too. Place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand. Colonial days, the judge was looking for the letter P for perjury to see if that person ever lied in court before. Or they're looking for the brands to see if they were a convicted criminal. And then the judge is going to throw them out of court. We still have throwbacks to colonial justice even today. Now, the two ways to get yourself killed in the city of Charleston by execution, one was hanging. But at least a few other people met their fate in another way, and that was being burned alive. Sarah Proctor Dickinson, the witch, met her fate that way. They attached her to a hurdle. Basically, a hurdle is similar to a tabletop. They dragged her through the streets of Charleston. They took her to a public place. They put her up against a post like that, nailed that tabletop in place, doused her with a flammable liquid, and set her on fire. She could have had it a lot worse to start with. You see, in some other colonies and in England, well, they had a different way of using that hurdle before they set your body on fire. What they would do is they drag you to a public location, and there would be 4 posts, basically table legs. They'd pick that hurdle up, they put it on top of those 4 posts, they'd nail it in place, and now you're laying out there with your hands and your arms stretched out, tied in place. And then they'd bring out 4 horses and tie them off to each limb and whip them and have them go in opposite directions. Or if the judge granted you mercy, they would take the horses until you're pulled tight and they'd stop the horses. And then somebody would come by with an axe and take off each of your limbs. That is called being drawn and quartered. What we're going to do now is we're going to coat you in pine tar because we don't want the insects and the animals and the birds eating you. We're going to put you in a cage called a gibbet. We're going to put a sign up there saying what crime you committed. We're going to hang you in a public square. People are going to smell you. They're going to come around to see what you did. They're going to read the sign. And now you're deterring them from doing the same crimes that you did. The city is founded in 1670. We set aside a large portion of the city as a burial ground. It was a potter's field. It was for unwanted people. Potter's field is unconsecrated, unholy, unblessed ground. A cemetery and a graveyard is usually blessed by a church, so it's holy ground. The criminals, the poor, the indigent, the enslaved, the Native American, people dying in war, all the unwanted bodies, they go into that potter's field. Between 1670 and 1780, we estimate 13,000 to 36,000 unblessed souls got buried in that ground. And in the middle of that location, they put a powder magazine. Now, the powder magazine was there when the British invaded Charleston. The invading forces, the British, they went around and confiscated all the weapons from the Charlestonians. They took them and stockpiled them in that powder magazine, but they didn't check them. One of them discharged, ignited all that gunpowder, it exploded. It killed about 200 to 300 people, and we had British soldier parts landing on the Unitarian Church a few blocks away. And then in 1802, the city of Charleston says, hey, we need a place to put a jail. Anybody got any brilliant ideas? Yeah, why don't we put it on that spot? You can't hurt the property values. Let's throw a jail on it and add to the ambiance. So from 1802 to 1939, the jail stood on top of that. And all that stuff we just talked about, all of this inhumanity, this death and depravity we just talked about happening in this room, happened on these grounds for 137 years. And that's where you're standing right now. So no wonder it's considered the most haunted place in the city of Charleston. Let's head in the next room. They'd actually brand it with multiple letters. They'd put it on somewhere on the palm of their hand or somewhere else on their face, or overlap them. Here's something you definitely want to get. All right, I'm going to step over here next to this, I guess. We're going to talk a little bit more about the history of the jail. The jail opened up in 1802 and closed in 1939. That's 137 years. Now, when this jail opened up, there was no electricity, no running water, and no sewage. When it closed 137 years later, it was in the same condition. It never changed. Now, the world changed. Things within the world changed. For instance, in 1802, when this jail opened up, the single most used weapon of war during that time was a single-shot muzzle-loading black powder rifle. That's when it opened up in 1802. When this jail closed in 1939, we were 6 years away from dropping an atomic bomb. So think about how the whole world changed, but this building never did. It stayed the same. It was frozen in time. The floors in here, they were covered with wood shavings. Those wood shavings, they were filled with human excrement and urine. Also in there was all the nice little creepy crawlies you can imagine. Fleas, flies, roaches, maggots, spiders, lice, ants, centipedes, millipedes, all the things that ate them, the rats and the mice, they were in that. And so were the snakes that ate the rats and the mice, and this is what you were bedding down upon. This is what you slept on. The windows had no glass on it. They only had bars. The birds and the bats came in, and so did the elements. And the summertime, this thing was extremely hot. Remember, this place has no sewage facilities. What they would do is they'd pour it into drain spouts, pipes that ran down, and it went outside and it landed in troughs. They said this jail, you could smell it 3 to 4 blocks away. Sanitary conditions and disease went hand in hand, so you can imagine what that was like. Now in the wintertime, fireplaces for your warmth. That's what keeps you warm in here. That's exactly what I want. I want to be in a cage where I have an open-faced fireplace with wood shavings all over the floor. This is a cage from here to here squared. You can see where the door is. And you're thinking to yourself, well, that's not so bad. I could handle being in a cage like that. No, it's not just you. It's 12 people in that cage, standing room only. Now, you have 2 buckets. 1 bucket for drinking, 1 bucket for going into the bathroom in. Needless to say, after the lights went out, you didn't mess with either bucket. You didn't want to make a mistake. You sure didn't want to drink out the wrong one, and you didn't want to be that one guy to go to the bathroom in the drinking water, because the next morning there'll be 11 people in there and 1 corpse. Now you're hanging up here on the bars, thinking to yourself, trying to sleep standing up, feeling how miserable you are, and you smell smoke. You open up your eyes and you see that the room's on fire. One of those embers has jumped out into those wood shavings. It's on fire. You take your shots with both of those buckets and hope for the best, because nobody's coming in here to rescue you. Nobody's going to open up these cages with 12 people in each one of these cages. You're on your own, and that's how quickly you could die in here. Now, lots of people in here, but we mentioned somebody in the very beginning, and I'm going to tell you the tale that I grew up with her. She's the reason why we're here today, and that would be Lavinia Fisher. There are as many versions of the John and Lavinia Fisher story as there are tour guides in Charleston. I said over across the hall, talk some more. I can have George Todd looking over my shoulder. Bonus, since we're in here, just since in honor of next month, one night I was in here and I was closing this place down, and I walked into this room and I looked at these caskets here. Well, I just had an uneasy feeling about it. And I'm closing the building down, so as I start walking, one of those stands upright and it makes a noise, a thud, and I look at it and I said, that's just weird. I start walking, all of a sudden that thing starts hopping behind me and the lid is slamming. I'm like, what in the world? I'm looking at that thing and it's just hopping, and all of a sudden the lid slams. I'm here. I'm for you. I am yours. And it's bouncing behind me and it's chasing me. And I start running down towards that back door there, and it's right on my heels. I'm yours. I'm here. I'm for you. I get to the end there and the door is locked up. I can't find anything to fight my way out. I'm horrified. I mean, I've never had any of this happen like this. So I reach in my pocket and all I can find is a handful of Hall's lozenges. And I take it and I throw it at it. And guess what? My coughing stopped. I'm sorry. Nah! Y'all were sucked into it. It's like, what is that idiot talking about? Coughing straight. Let's get back to the regularly scheduled program here. This jail was originally built for 140 prisoners. Never housed that many. It usually housed over that. Originally 140 prisoners, sometimes it housed close to 300 or 400. Then the Civil War occurred, and the backyard became a prisoner of war camp. So let's throw another 300 to 400 additional prisoners out there. Now, when the first Union soldiers showed up, 300 of them, Confederacy was well planned. What did they do for the 300? They gave them 40 tents. How long do you think it took before tents went from looking like that to looking like that, especially when those men were coming in lacking clothing? Who wants to work in places like that? Sociopaths and psychopaths. That's the folks that worked in these places. There was an individual that was housed in here. This was the area that he stayed. He was a horrible, terrible, despicable human being. He was probably the worst individual, one of the worst individuals ever housed in this jail. And that man was not even a prisoner. That man was a Confederate surgeon, and this was his operating room. His name was Dr. George Todd. That's Dr. George Todd gracing our presence there on the wall. Dr. George Todd, this was his operating room, and because of the sanitary conditions and, of course, surgical facilities the way they are, as they are then, adding them to this horrible, nasty, filthy place made it a lot worse. So this also doubled as a morgue. And from the end of the Civil War onward, this pretty much stayed much a morgue. That's why these coffins were here. They would build them on the grounds and they would put the people in these coffins and get them to a potter's field. Now, Dr. George Todd, he hated the Union soldiers, but he also hated people of color. And heaven forbid that you happen to be both. And unfortunately, we had folks that ended up here that were. The 54th Massachusetts, an all-black regiment, fought at the Battle of Battery Wagner, both battles. Those men that were captured, those soldiers, they were brought here and they were housed here. According to Dr. George Todd, he did not consider those men soldiers. He considered them runaway slaves, and he wanted them treated as such. And well, as far as he was concerned, the punishment for a runaway slave was hanging. He didn't want them to be treated as soldiers. He wanted them to take out and be summarily hanged without a trial or anything. And he actually got Charleston rallied behind him, and they were getting ready to do it, but Dr. George Todd had some opposition from an unlikely source. President Abraham Lincoln stood up against him and backed him and the city of Charleston down. There might have been some personal animosity between the two men. You see, Dr. George Todd had a sister, Mary Todd Lincoln. This was the president's brother-in-law. I guarantee that man did not get invited to the White House for Thanksgiving. Getting into the strange and unusual here, one of our tour guides made friends with a TV star, Ryan Buell. Ryan Buell was actually one of the lead individuals on a paranormal reality show called Paranormal State back then. They did an episode in here. Not long after the episode aired, Ryan's back in town and he contacts this tour guide. He says, you know what? I need you to do me a favor if you can. I've got somebody I brought with me and I want to get their impression of this place. Can you make it happen? So our tour guide does. He makes it happen. Ryan pulls up in the parking lot that evening. He gets out of his black SUV, walks around to the passenger side, opens up the door, and out steps an elderly woman. Her name's Lorraine Warren. But if you don't recognize her name, you'll recognize her cases. The Amityville Horror, The Conjuring, Annabelle, the creepy little demon-possessed doll that she keeps in a glass box. Yeah, those are her cases. Now they bring her into this building and she's a psychic medium. She's wandering around in here and she seems to be fine until they get her into this room. Once they get her into this room, her whole disposition changes. She says there's lots and lots of folks in this room. Figured I'd tell you that while we're in the creepy darkness over here. Lots and lots and lots of folks in here, but there's something in here and I don't know if I can even consider it to be human. And it's not happy that we're in here, and I believe we're in danger and we should probably leave. As our tour guide says, when the wonderful little old lady with a demon-possessed doll in a box in her house says, get out of the jail, you don't argue with her. So they each grabbed an arm. They said her feet never touched again until they got her out in the parking lot. This room creeped out Lorraine Warren. So in the hallway, we're going to talk about solitary, not so solitary confinement. It's said this way.
Where is Todd buried?
I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head.
This guy definitely knows Lorraine Warren. Haven't you covered like some of the movies on Midnight Terrors? Okay.
Franchise.
For some reason, it's blurry whenever it's focused on you. It'll focus on everyone else's faces, but not yours. That's weird. It might be your hair. Just the fact that your hair is dark. It keeps getting blurry.
What's that?
My camera keeps getting blurry every time I try to focus on Kevin over here. It's just as soon as it touches Kevin, yeah, it gets blurry again.
Dominus Sanctus Numinus Patra. Anybody got any holy water for this man before we get him out of here? Solitary, not so solitary confinement. You're not alone, but technically you are. See, this go round in the jail, we recreated something, and that would be the iron coffins or boxes that are in solitary confinement. You've got iron boxes in there, so you're not alone. There's somebody in a box next to you. You're alone in your box, but there's somebody there, and you wouldn't be in there for days. They would put you in there for weeks. Let's talk about gravity in an iron box. You've got a slot there. So let's throw your food through the slot. Where's it gonna go? Gravity, right down to the bottom. You gotta go to the bathroom multiple times during that week. Guess where all that goes? Right down to the bottom where your food is. Now all those insects and those rodents, they're coming in there after your food. Where are they going? Everything goes down to the bottom, Bruce. Does anything ever come up to the top? Yes. This is Charleston. We're gonna make sure of that. We're out here and we're in a marshland. This place floods. There's a pump out there that come on and has a nice red light, makes a lot of noise. It sucks the water out of here. Here, most of the time, it would be ankle deep or more. That right there was the drain where they would try to get water out of here. So you're in water. Whenever we have a tropical storm or any kind of major rains, it will flood in here. And sometimes the water level, before they painted the bars, would get up to here. Now, you're in a box, so it's going to displace the water even more. So that water is going to be up and sloshing over that grate. And you're in there with all that stuff from all those weeks floating around in a soup with you as the main ingredient. When you get out of here, first thing you're gonna want is a blanket. Because you can go up there and you can shred it and you can braid it, because a blanket will make a better rope. And then you hang yourself so you never end up in these boxes again. We can make that even worse. Take 2 of those metal coffins, lay them down flat, take them out back. Now you're cooking in an iron box in the summer sun. You can't touch the top. When the water comes in, it's a bathtub. It's not gonna drain out like it's standing vertical. When it's laying horizontal, it's gonna fill up. You're hanging onto that grate. And eventually you're gonna get tired, you're gonna fall back into the box, and you're gonna drown. Sit across over here. This room seems to give all the tour guides the willies, I guess is a nice way to say it. None of us like being in this room. When we first opened up this place, this room was completely filled with display items. We had all sorts of artifacts and things of that nature. That was October of last year. See what's in it now. It's almost empty. We want to spend as little time in here as possible. This room just gives us the creeps. Now there's certain other reasons why it might give us the creeps, but I'll leave those stories for another tour. But the one thing that's in this room is this creepy wheelchair. Artifact that has been here the longest. And well, anybody that's been in this tour business, in this building doing tours, each of us have a creepy wheelchair story. We all have them. But there's one story that happened to a friend of mine. Now what happens with him, he's in here one morning, he's doing a history tour. History tours are for folks that aren't brave like you. They want to come out in the daylight. They don't want to be in here after dark. And all they want to hear about is history. They don't care about ghosts, but guess what? Ghosts don't care about them either. So these folks get in this building, they turn around the corner just in time to see this wheelchair doing a little spin on its own by itself. and then it stops. A little hushed conversation, a little nervous laughter. They continue on the tour. Out of sight, out of mind, they forget about it. Till 3 nights later, same tour guide is in this building, and on this tour there's a little girl and her mom. The little girl's about 6 years old. She's singing, she's dancing, she's doing cartwheels and somersaults, and kids that act like that in places like this, they creep me out because they're weirdos. What she does is she goes out in the hallway and she sits down next to this wheelchair in the darkness. And our tour guide shakes his head. He keeps telling us tales. And then when he finishes, he starts walking towards the door, and little Miss Creepiness jumps up from the darkness and startles him. She comes running back in. She's screaming, Mister, I need to tell you something. It's really, really important. I promised. He goes, yes, ma'am, what's that? She says, well, that little boy that I'm sitting out there and talking to says he's sorry he scared you and those folks the other morning when he was playing with the wheelchair. This tour guide felt the color drain out of his face. He felt his knees start to buckle, had to go up and lean against the wall to collect his composure. There was no way that little girl could have known that information. Then he had to explain to him who was she talking to. I said, oh no, that room's got some creepiness to it. It's not uneven. That's one of the worst rooms in this building. We have a bunch of tour guides that do this tour. What ends up happening, they came in, they put up the displays and the items and set everything up. People that don't have to work in here. The tour guides have to come in here and they do that, and they set up a lot of stuff where we had to spend a lot of time in this room, and everybody started complaining about it. Nobody liked it, so that's why some of these rooms have so much more in it than this room does. We don't like being in that room. We try to minimize our time in it, and it does. The longer you're in there, the worse it gets. It feels like the room is moving. It feels like it's shifting. Like you said, you asked if it was uneven. It's not. It's just something with that room. I don't want to put a whole lot of stock or faith into all the stories and some of the stuff there's something weird with that room. On Sundays, like today, Star Gospel Mission would come in here and they'd bring church to the jail, and this was the time that the place seemed to be the most calm. What I want to talk about in here, though, is the debtor's prison. When the jail first opened up in 1802, the first floor was a debtor's prison, and if you were a man that could not pay your debt, you got sent to jail to work it off, had nobody to take care of your family, guess who came to jail with you? The wife and the kiddos. Now, they come to work off your debt. On the first floor, allegedly, we have a little individual that haunts in here, and we don't know what her name is, but we call her Bridget. Bridget is a little girl about 6 years old that haunts in here. You can hear her laughing and giggling through here. She's often seen around the kitchen area and the morgue area, and, well, she's sometimes seen out back. She has a warped sense of humor, so to speak. Back a few years ago, you'd have to come in here, and there would be no lighting in here pretty much. You'd have to come down this darkened hallway all the way to the end, lock this back door, and then turn around and walk all the way back to the other end in the darkness, and then set the alarm and go home. One night I do that. And when I get to the door back here, I lock it, I hear running and giggling in this building. And needless to say, I open up the back door, I go out, I walk around the front, set the alarm, and I go home. So whoever that is can have it. Nobody came down the hallway. Second time that happened to me, I waited, and it stopped, and I've never had it happen again. But I've heard her giggling in here, and this is not the place for little kids to be playing in. It is what it is. Let's head across the hallway. I've got a flashlight somewhere. I know I do. There you go. Now, the jailers actually stayed on the grounds here. Captain Bennett, who I just mentioned, they had another section of this jail completely for him and his family. He raised 7 out of his 9 kids here on this property. I can't imagine raising my family here with just wooden doors between me and these inmates that were housed in here. Now, when they had an execution in the city, they sent guards out from the jail and they scoured the city. They went all over the city. They're looking in the alleys, they're looking in the back rooms, the little flop house hotels, all over the city. What are they looking for? They're looking for the executioner, because also the town drunk. All that hanging, all that execution of people weighed on this man's mind, and the only way he could do it was being inebriated the majority of his life. They go look for him 2 weeks before the execution. And what they would do is they'd bring him into the jail and they would lock him up to sober him up. So can you imagine being locked in a cell waiting your execution with this man detoxing, screaming about how he's going to snap somebody's neck so he can get drunk again? Your life is worth a drink to him. This is his quarters. He allegedly haunts in here. I think that probably covers as much history and not getting on as much ghost. But there is a couple of things I want to go back here before we head out of here. I want to kind of give you some ideas with too, because of what we're doing. So let's go back to isolation. Beatrice St. Julian Ravenel and a lot of the other researchers describe where Lavinia was kept before the execution. They said it was on the original section of the jail underneath the stairs, which are right here. It goes back this way. And it was a room with no windows and no lighting and a small cell. That would be here. I think this is Lavinia's final cell. She would have been in here with John, there's a vent right there. That vent was into an adjoining cell on the other side, and that's where they kept her executioner. Can you imagine her being in here and him being in here with that man detoxing on the other side of the wall, screaming through the vent at them? Because originally they had taken them upstairs, as we know. The Roberts and John Fisher pushed the bricks out from underneath the window, and they tried to escape, and Lavinia got left behind. So when they got recaptured, they put them in more secure facilities on the lower floor. This is where they ended up. Over here, we're going to take you on the way out the door, and we're going to go out the back here. Anybody feeling real dirty or anything? Anybody need a shower before you go? Because here's your bathing facilities right here on either side. What they would do during the Civil War, actually, you'd come in the back of the jail. They would put you in this trough here. They'd give a bucket to you, get you covered with water, soap you down, wash you down. Then they'd dump a bucket of lye on top of you. That would kill all the insects. It was also caustic. It would blister your skin. It would make clumps of your hair fall out too, and it'd make you more susceptible to disease. They didn't know that then. So now you're out back in the elements. There's nothing back there. Those men actually tore down one of the outhouses to use the wood to cook. They had no wood. They would give them supplies. They'd give them beans and bags of grains and stuff like that so they could cook their own food outside, but they really had nothing to burn, so they burned up the outhouse to use that. Now they're out there in the elements. Nothing but men sleeping on top of men in pits out here. They talked about the ground moving because the ground was covered in lice. So they would bring them in here, they would de-lice them by dumping the lye on them, but really what they were doing was stripping away all of their natural defenses, and they were putting them back out there, and they were dying of dysentery even faster. The horrors of this place. Get out the back, call it the evening. Well, hopefully that helped, and hopefully I didn't say so much of the ghost stuff for them. So I try to keep it more along the history with you guys. Because what you could do after it rained, you could walk around here, and oftentimes I'd give handfuls of pottery, pieces of pottery sherds, because it goes back to Greek tradition. What they would do is they'd break your plates over your grave, so when you go into the afterlife, you could reassemble it and you could have your food and your drink over there. 13,000 to 36,000 people with broken plates and stuff on here. Stuff was always washing up and coming from the ground, so every time I'd do a tour, I'd walk through this place and I'd find pieces of pottery, and I'd find pieces of artifact, or pipe stems, clay pipe stems or pipe bowls from people that were in here. So it's a way to connect with that. So I was hoping I could find something. Maybe we'll walk over here and we'll find something as we go. If we look for it, we'll see how good my eyes are tonight. There you go. There's your piece of pottery right there that came up whiteware. Washed up. So there's just something that used to be on somebody's grave. And they actually had gallows built out here. So there would be right here on the opposite side of this little structure for the stairs, there would have been a gallows there, one of the last known gallows. What they had when it came to hanging people, the reason they went out and found that executioner because they were specialized in it. They had to sober them up, but you had to calculate the drop, the weight, things of that nature. So it was more scientific procedure of doing that. They'd come in, they'd measure the person, they'd weigh the person, and then they'd judge how far they had to drop, how much rope they had to do. Well, it was quality back then, but then we got to quantity. Now we wanted to hang people, so we created a system called the upright jerker. It was a wooden box out here, basically. It contained a weight in it. You had somebody that dropped a lever. It went up through a pulley system, tied around the person's neck, so when they dropped the weight, it would fall into a big pit and snatch the person up on the ground, off the ground and hang them. But it wasn't as scientific as a hanging man was. They thought it was a one-size-fits-all. If you take somebody and you put them on there, and where they're 40 pounds soaking wet, and you drop that 500-pound weight, what it will do is they'll close that noose, they'll decapitate them, and they'll throw their head across the fence there, and that would happen here. Now, the last person, Daniel Duncan, that was executed here, he was a little bit heavier, and what it did is it slowly dragged him across the ground and got him into the air, but not high enough to snap his neck. And once you have a hanging, you can't legally interfere with it. So he spun around, and it took him, I think, about 17 minutes or more to twist and die a slow, painful, agonizing death. He was a man of color. He was a black man that was executed here, and some people believe he was innocent. The thing with it is, it was such a barbaric hanging that everybody, whites, blacks together, rallied against hanging in the city of Charleston and stopped it all over the state of South Carolina. And then they took the executions and they moved him to Columbia, and they changed it. They went to the electric chair. Not that it's not more barbaric, but nobody's going to be suffering for 17 or more minutes spiraling, doing what they call the hangman stance. And then we had a particular, who was it? One of our attorney generals in here. He wanted to execute more people too, so he said we needed to do away with the electric chair and go to the electric couch. That's what he wanted to do, and that was back in my lifetime. It didn't go over real well, let's put it that way.
Anybody else have any questions? Keep it.
Hey everyone, it's Kevin here. I'm the creator and co-host of a weekly horror podcast called Midnight Terrors. Happy to be here to support Savannah and look for the upcoming episode with her as a featured guest.
If you want to hear the actual truth of Lavinia Fisher, check out Savannah's channel and last week's video.